I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Yafi Yair. Check out my films Doors of Perception on Amazon Prime, Occult Louisiana's on Tubi, Roku, Apple, and many more. We're booking guests for February. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome Dr. Yafi Yair. She is a clinical psychologist, multidimensional channel, and author who bridges science with the unseen realms. Dr. Yafi, welcome. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great. Thank you. I am quite excited with these crazy times we're living in.
Yes, it is crazy times, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. We're going to be talking about your experience channeling non-human intelligences, spirits, fairies, and extraterrestrials, and there are such fascinating possibilities and implications surrounding this phenomena. But honestly, over the years, I've become a bit more skeptical about channeling in general, mainly because I've had 5 to 6 guests a week for almost a decade. Many of them also channelers, as well as other researchers and spiritualists that have shared examples of deception and presented theories about tricksters and negative entities posing as benevolent beings, along with thought forms, egregores, and etheric parasites. How can we really even tell what is communicating? But this is why you're here, to help address all these questions and concerns and help us understand how to discern these beings, as well as we're going to get your insights into the nature of the beings you're communicating with. Before we do, this is your first time on. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and let the audience know how they can find out more.
Sounds good. So yes, I'm Dr. Yafi. My doctorate is in clinical psychology. So my background is clinical. It's very scientific oriented, left brain oriented, and really it kind of captures my journey of being in a very left brain practical world and navigating this intuitive, practical, creative, analytical sides of myself, parts of myself, eventually arriving to where I am today, which of course, it's not a destination, it's always a journey, but where I really consider myself full-on experiencer, believer, although the word belief is tricky, we can get into that, but really knower is maybe the right word, but maybe not. Maybe an explorer, an open-minded explorer who has taken the leap of faith. So I am still skeptic in some way. I still have my critical thinking. I still have my discernment. But in terms of my spiritual journey, in terms of my openness, and maybe a good way to say it, of what is possible, what is potentially real, if we're having that conversation, I have opened more and more and more over the years of my journey, which really what caught my attention in your introduction when you said that you have become more and more skeptical, which I have never heard before. So that's really interesting.
Well, I have become skeptical of the phenomena of channeling. There have been plenty other
it's very unusual
metaphysical phenomena that I've become more open to. The reason I said I've become more skeptical from channeling is because of the experiences not only that I've heard of, but I've also had a few of my own questionable communication experiences with non-human intelligences. But we'll get to all that.
Okay, so yes. So my background, doctor of clinical psychology, super analytical. Really, I was also, the way I was practicing was quite mainstream until 2011-12, where I had this really intense spiritual awakening. It was intense in the way it ended up culminating, but it was also gradual. And at first, it was my interest, just interest in anything spiritual, paranormal, waking up. And then I discovered hypnosis, which allowed me to insert that interest into my clinical practice, and started meditating every day, started going to the Monroe Institute, which again is its own conversation. And then my mom transitioned very, very quickly. And my spiritual journey really became very enhanced and accelerated and the focus of my life. And through that, my intuition really, really came online. And anything that I repressed throughout my life, by really committing to a more analytical, practical way of life and way of thinking, that all began to shake. And a lot of cracks began to form in the less flexible, malleable, for example, the clinical field, but also my mind, the way I was used to thinking. As open-minded as I thought I was, that journey into developing my intuition, into psychic explorations, and then channeling, was wilder than I could have ever imagined. So it's an ongoing process of expansion, both mentally, energetically, physiologically, in any way we can imagine.
Tell us a little bit about your earliest experiences, how they came about.
Yes. So I will say that in this journey of my channeling, I published 2 books, and they're a little different, but in different ways, they really, really capture the journey of a new channeler and also the exposure to all these different types of sources that I've channeled. So the first book is called Conversations with the Earth. And in that book, I really do channel all kind of earth energies and earth elements. And the focus of the book is Earth and humanity and the changes that we're going through right now. And what's interesting about that book, many things, but one of the things that is interesting is that there are many, 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 many different perspectives. Literally every chapter, I channel a different source based on what me and the group I was channeling with were interested in. So you have, as I mentioned, perspectives of the Earth, and then you have all kind of galactic perspectives, the moon, Andromeda. It gets wilder and wilder with different galactics and different councils and even the hybrid program and the hybrid children. So it really gets quite wild in terms of the sources that I channel. So the second book, Conversations with Hathor, which is the second published, it was published in 2025. However, it begins and ends in terms of the actual channeling within it before and after Conversations with the Earth. So it really captures in terms of my process of being a new channeler. Also, a part of it was because the people that were asking the questions at the beginning of the book, at the beginning of my journey, were other channelers in training. So a lot of the questions have to do about the process of channeling, about how to develop trust, about how to improve your discernment and develop those subtle senses so you can have better discernment in terms of what you are channeling and how you are connecting. So it really has been a journey. And for me personally, engaging in channeling training, meaning being a part, being in a program, in a workshop, and being taught and having the framework and the structure of the program really helped me allow myself to go there and allow myself also to bypass that critical mind of, is it real? Is it not real? Because I wasn't offering it to clients. I was experimenting as a student, right? So even though I already channeled before I took that class, that training, taking a training and being in that playful atmosphere, which is so important. We can talk about that more, why it's so important, but also having the openness to explore and experiment and not take it too seriously and not to make it too important. It is important, but not too important, was crucial for me as a channeler and for anyone that is interested in developing their intuition, in developing their psychic abilities, and especially if they want to become channelers, I really recommend taking some kind of a training. It's going to give you tools. It's going to have you working with other people with similar interests. But again, having that playful space to experiment and explore is so, so important.
Talk a little bit about some of the beings that you channeled. You mentioned from your first book you were channeling earth-based beings. Maybe talk a little bit about some of those beings and the other entities that you've channeled over the years.
Yes, yes. I found it amazing what's conscious enough to be able to communicate with us. And in that way, right? Conscious enough for the communication to become verbal in English for us to communicate. So that was one of the concepts that constantly blew my mind early on. So the book Conversations with the Earth opens with fire consciousness. And again, I was completely blown away that fire has an organized enough consciousness to communicate with us. And also I was surprised at the level of wisdom and unique perspective that came through with each element and each source that I channeled. So one of the beautiful lessons that the fire consciousness came through, and by the way, the book is in order. So fire consciousness was actually the first earth element to come through to me, for me to channel. So it is in order. And although I didn't know it at the time, it was significant. Everything is significant. We're so led every step along the way. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So fire consciousness, one of the points of wisdom that it had to share specifically significant for humanity at this time is that concept of the cycle of destruction and creation. And fire consciousness teaches us that destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. It's two sides of the same continuous cycle. So you cannot have one without the other, and you cannot consider one good and the other bad. I mean, you could, and that's what humans often do, but that really complicates our experience. And it is time really to upgrade our perception and our way of understanding everything so we can take that leap of faith together and make that shift together. So again, fire consciousness talks about how destruction and creation are two sides of the same cycle. And a lot of what we're experiencing right now, and that came up before the intense cycle of destruction, but we're really seeing now destruction happening around us, whether it's war or whether it's systems breaking down, political systems, medical system, all kind of societal systems are really reaching points where they cannot function as they are. And that's one of the things that the guides have been warning us, but not warning as it's horrible and it's going to happen, but the opposite, as it's going to happen. And it's time to not react with fear, but having a wider, broader understanding of everything. Mm-hmm. And that's how it ties into that concept of that extremely profound, yet seemingly simple points of perspective of fire, how everything that are happening right now is a part of destruction and creation. So when people see things happening around us, whether they're chaos or uncertainty, or maybe the news, or maybe stories of suffering, one of the things to remember here is that, well, one, it's not as bad as they're making it seem. That's always true. But whatever is bad, whatever is broken, whatever is breaking down, it is a part of that newness that we are headed towards and we are creating right now. So this is a part of why we're seeing so much breaking down and so much, again, uncertainty. The breaking down, the chaos before the reorganization of a higher order.
When you're channeling, are you entering an altered state, meditating? What is your methodology to achieve that communication?
Yes, I do enter an altered state. For me, it's very, very quick. I literally go inward and I'm there. I just turn my direction inward. However, that has been the case. This is the case, one, because I do have some natural inclination, but also the practice that I mentioned. I have been meditating daily for about 13 years. I've been going to the Monroe Institute regularly for about 12 years. So I have this years of training, navigating the states of consciousnesses, different states of consciousness, identifying them and navigating them. So yes, I put myself in an altered state. It is equivalent to people that practice self-hypnosis. It is also similar to a trance or deep meditation. They're just different terminologies for essentially brain waves and energetic state that is both very, very grounded and very open at the same time. While in my mind, it's as if I take the back seat. So I am conscious in the background. In the background, I am listening to the conversation. I'm receiving much more information that is able to come through. So as Dr. Yafi, as Yafi is sitting there in the background, listening to the conversation, managing the energy, which is a part of my role as a channeler, to manage my own energy, which includes mental space, includes my physical body, for example. It includes not being too busy with my mind, again, or my emotional state. So there's a lot of managing in the background back there. However, as I mentioned, I am in the background. And in terms of the communication of what to say next, for example, or where to go next, they are mostly in charge. It is a cooperation, but I am more in the back seat. Now, as a result, when I'm back, people often want to know if I remember, and it's very fluid. So I feel like I remember everything, but it's a little bit like waking up from a dream. The more we talk about it, the more the memories will trigger and I will remember more clearly. But I have learned that I think I remember everything. And when I go back and listen to the recordings, which I don't do as often as I should, I am shocked. There are always information that I didn't remember. There's always information that surprises me. And recently, a couple of months ago, I had something that was almost embarrassing to me because I was actually doing an interview and the interviewer was asking me something. And I didn't think. I was getting intuitive information as we were talking. And I was sharing all this information. I was so excited. And I was saying, this is the first time I'm getting this. And I was so excited. I'm getting this new information. And later I found out that about a month prior, I channeled this information. So it wasn't even new. My group, I'm sure, was familiar with the information. I had no memory of channeling it. I had no memory of that being put out there in any way. So for me, this was completely new information. So it's both a little embarrassing, but also if you look at it from a skeptic perspective, looking for validation, you could see it as validation that the information is more than just coming from me, and it's not just me speaking or bringing forth the information.
Do you test the spirit or entity that you are communicating with to confirm its nature?
I feel its nature even before it comes through. So even now, very easily, but even as a new channeler. So let's talk about that because that's important. So I want to mention one thing, and then we'll go into my experience. I want to mention that having doubts is normal. Having human emotions with the full range and full spectrum is normal. However, if you are more fearful than you are curious and secure, I think you should do more inner work before you attempt to channel or really do any psychic work. And I think that's a very, very, very important point. And it's not that you're not good enough, and you may be very psychic intuitively, because it is like a gift. Like, people are more musical, so people can be more psychically inclined. However, if your personality, if your emotion is still fear-oriented, still very anxious, I recommend holding on doing any psychic work and doing more inner work to clear this as much as possible. Now, back to my experience. So the first time I ever channeled Hathor, I did not know Hathor. So I didn't know who I was going to channel. The name came through. The group I was with was familiar with the name. So they were all excited I was going to channel an Egyptian goddess. And to people who, like me, never heard the name Hathor, we know the name Hathor from ancient Egypt, where indeed she was one of the gods. And I didn't know who I was going to channel. The name Hathor sounded very masculine to me, actually, very warrior-like, probably because the word Thor within it. So, so like I'm channeling Hathor and I'm like expecting Hathor. And I close my eyes, I go inward, I say my invocation, I open to the energy, and I feel this nurturing, loving essence. And I feel it with my body, with my mind, with my energy. It's just like I'm bathed with this nurturing. And it's so difficult to explain in words, but this nurturance and openness and the wisdom that came through, everything felt so right about it. Now, somebody that's coming from a fear perspective can say, but what if you're being tricked? And I will say that you can be tricked if you're not grounded. You can be tricked if you're not clear. And that is why I started this conversation by saying, if these concerns of yours are greater than your curiosity to explore, to experience, this is not your path for now. Mm-hmm. However, if you feel that it's right for you and you feel it aligns, you have synchronicities along the way, you're excited about it, but you're not afraid. You're maybe unsure. You may be somewhat skeptical. That is okay, but you're not fearful about it. There is a difference, and you feel the difference, and you have to trust yourself to feel the difference, but you also have to be really honest with yourself, because what makes us not prepared for such thing is when our wants are too involved in it, because our wants and our fears can come on a physiological level, on an ego, human level, come really from the same place. So if we really, really, really want to be a channeler, and we really, really want to be helpful for others, and we really, really want to be the ones that people come to us, that want can actually come in the way of being a clear channel.
Would you say that those that have not done enough of the inner work you were mentioning earlier may attract more of the negative beings?
Absolutely. And we don't even have to, we can call them negative beings, and we can talk about even the different kinds and what happens. But the idea is that it's like The Secret, right? And it's like the law of resonance. Whatever you vibrate in, that's what you attract. Whatever is in coherence with the way you are, that's what you attract. So it makes sense that if someone is attempting a psychic connection, but there's a lot of unclarity, a lot of fear, a lot of, again, maybe also curiosity and other things, but not clear. Groundedness is so important. We can talk about it. When there's the lack of groundedness, the lack of clarity, of course, you are, it's like random calling. Ooh, what psychic entity can I communicate with? And if you're not very discriminating, guess what? You're going to get a variety of all kind of things coming to you. And it can be things coming to you, or it can be things and it can be things that mirror to you in your own field. So if you have unresolved aspects, unresolved emotions, those may be what's reflected to you when you try to reach out. And people may think it's foreign entities, even they may go to demonics, and often they don't realize that they are literally communicating with aspects of themselves that are not whole, that are not integrated, that are not clear.
Going back to some of the beings that you communicate with, talk a little bit about the difference between communication, say, between extraterrestrials and other spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I will open by saying that all the sources that I've channeled, whether it was earth elements like we've talked about, or fairies, or extraterrestrials, or councils, they're all multidimensional beings that are ascended, meaning they're of the light. What does that mean? That I haven't channeled, for example, ghosts. I haven't channeled any extraterrestrials that are not of higher dimensional frequencies and that are not, if we want to use really elementary words, good. So I have only channeled those types of sources and beings. And to my shock, what I have learned that there is actually more in common than separating all those different sources. So yes, there are differences. And I feel the difference as I channel. I mentioned to you that I can recognize what entity is coming through before it comes through. As soon as I close my eyes and I connect to the essence, I can detect it. I've learned how to feel it. However, there are differences. Some feel deeper than others, depending maybe on what dimension they're coming from. Some feel more grounded. Some may feel more neutral, while others more emotionally involved. So there are differences, but what was even more shocking to me is how similar and the overlap. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned I channel a fairy, it gets crazier and crazier, and I channel extraterrestrials, and I channel Hathor, who is a divine feminine, also a Syrian collective. So much, much more what I briefly mentioned as an Egyptian goddess. And when at the beginning of this year, when I channeled Hathor, she/they said, in June, you're going to have a physical contact. Physical contact. And me as Yafi, I assumed it was going to be extraterrestrials, which I was extremely excited about. I want physical. I've had contact in terms of orbs and stuff like that, but what I know, what I've been told, we're headed towards face-to-face physical contact. So I'm really excited about it. And that's what I thought they were talking about, that I'm finally going to meet them face-to-face in the physical in that way. And to my amazement, and they gave me a hint that it wasn't going to be exactly what I think, but I didn't know what to think. And to my amazement, in June, I really did have a beautiful interaction, a sighting, but it was with a fairy, where I saw a fairy in the physical, which was really, really amazing and cool, but not what I expected at all. And it's still my mind, and I think every time I think I'm totally open and I discover new and new layers, so who knows, but one of the realizations, as I mentioned, is what's the overlap, and even in terms of contact, when humans are talking about contact and communicating with multidimensional beings and talking about aliens and extraterrestrials, what we don't understand that we're really talking about non-human intelligence in many, 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 many forms. In like more than our wildest imagination can comprehend. And some of them we have words for, like extraterrestrial beings, multidimensional beings, fairies, nature spirits. These are words and categories that we have. But I think there are going to be so many different beings that we do not even have words and categories for, or words that we have that we clump together many types of beings because that's all we know. So contact and extraterrestrials and ultra-terrestrials is a very, very rich world that includes within it much, much more than we think. And again, fairies and all kind of magical beings that we really considered as mythological or magical beings are going to become more available for us to interact with on a physical level, which is going to be a part of contact and a part of our consciousness, evolution, and the changes that we're going to experience as humans.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your fairy sighting, what it looked like, the circumstances?
Yes, I was in an upstate New York retreat. It was a channeling retreat, so there was channeling involved and a lot of connecting to nature and different exercises. And this was the day after the retreat, so it wasn't a part of the official retreat, but we were in that high vibe. And I was talking to a new friend. So me and another woman were sitting facing each other. So you're talking really, really close, right? Maybe a couple of feet apart, our faces. As we were talking, we were discussing my upcoming trip to Egypt. I'm taking a group to Egypt. I'm very excited about that. So again, very high vibe conversation. And all of a sudden, right between us, so if we are 2 feet apart and the fairy came between our faces, think about how close. We're talking inches from my eyes, from her eyes as well. This ball of light, and I'll describe it with more details because it was not an opaque ball of light. This ball of light flew between our faces, right in front of us, and continued to take off and took off. Now, usually when they're really unusual things, I'm the only one seeing them. And then I have to grapple, of course, with that. But this time I caught her reacting with her eyes. I saw this face. And I said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "What was this?" And my first reaction was spirit. And then as soon as that tuned in, I'm like, this was a fairy. And I said, "This is the first time I'm seeing a fairy too." And she's like, "I've never seen anything unusual in my life." And I said, "Yes, this was a fairy." And we described to each other what we saw. That was later on to make sure that we saw the same thing, and we did. And not only we saw the same thing, and she has never had a paranormal experience in that way, that fairy visited her at night in her bedroom and was flying around her room. And her mind first went to, oh, it's a really big firefly. You know how we try to rationalize things. And the fairy was this big. We're talking in inches, maybe 4 or 5 inches. Mm-hmm. So then she realized there's no firefly this big. And then she looked at it more as it flew swooshing around her room, and then it took off. And I'll describe what it looked like, but I will say that later, when I went back home and channeled Viola the fairy, which is an aspect of mine, that's who I channeled, the fairy world, Viola, I thought it was Viola. And she said no, that she sent a local friend to make an appearance. So apparently they're fairies that are local to specific areas. So now I'll describe exactly what I saw. So it was an illuminated ball of light. It was somewhat see-through because inside I could see a figure, and the figure had wings, and the wings were very, very geometrical. Like if you look at dragonfly wings, you know, you have all this geometry within the wings. So it was very, very similar. It didn't have a color. It was white, whitish glow. And it was very, very bright. So it didn't look, if you see a bird fly or something and there's light reflecting on it, it didn't look like that. You could see very easily that it was emitting its own light because it was very, very, very bright. And like I said, I could see the wings and the geometry within it and that little figure, and it just swooshed by, and it was all engulfed in that. So the figure inside was illuminated. It was very, very bright, and the ball itself was illuminated. So that's how the fairy looked.
I'd like to get your insights into the nature of fairies. I've had other researchers and even experiencers discuss the duality amongst the fairy world, how there may be some that don't have humanity's best interest in mind and may not be best to communicate with them. I've heard of fairy abductions. Again, there's nothing to verify with any of this, but it's fascinating stories. Is there a duality amongst fairies where some may be dangerous?
So we actually never asked Viola that, so I can't answer that exactly. But what I can answer is that a lot of people that interact with fairies, and not only fairies, even when we heard about siren and mermaids, how their voice slur, not captains, whatever,
sailors,
ocean people, sailors, and and lead them to their demise, right? So fairy is very similar with stories of fairies that lead people or lead children and they disappear. And I'm not saying it accounts for the whole story, but a part of it, and it's definitely a part of it, that fairies and all those other nature spirits, let's just call them in general nature spirits, are very aligned with the earth, with nature, and with the harmonious existence of nature. And anyone that comes with a different agenda, and it can be a specific agenda, or it can just be the makeup of the person. Not everybody is super respectful and loving of our beautiful planet. People that are not aligned with their mentality will experience them, and it makes sense when you think of it that way, differently than people that are coming with pure heart connection. And many of the experiences that are more negative, and here we're not talking about innocent, beautiful children being abducted. Here we're talking about more nefarious, convoluted incidents that include adults. They will only include adults. That's why the interactions would be portrayed as negative or even harmful. And I do believe that fairies can be tricksters and they can mess with you. They've even messed with me in a friendly way, but they've made me get lost in ways that don't make sense, like on trails. So they do play around. However, if you're coming with a true, pure intention, and we're talking about your alignment with nature of the earth, then you're going to have a positive experience, only positive experiences. It kind of goes back to our conversation of mirror, right? So any energetic experiences always mirror you. And if you find that your experiences are troubling in any way, that means that something in your field is not resonating in coherence. Something in your field is not clear, which is why this is what you are noticing and seeing in your environment. So it's very, very important to realize that if you're interacting, whether it's fairies or aliens or demons or channeled entities, if you're interacting with things that are not good, that are not pure, that are not constructive and helpful, that means you're reaching out not from a pure place. Not because you're evil, because you're not clear. You're not clear, again, in terms of harmonious. You're not coherence, resonating in coherence.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the information you've channeled that relates to the time period we're in, the state of humanity, the state of awareness that the collective has right now. There's also a rapid push for technological growth. There's many that are over-reliant on technology, and the future is unsure based on some of the ideologies that are coming out right now. In my perspective, they're very anti-human, and the less we participate with it, the better off we are. But talk a little bit about some of the information you've received about the time period we're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the time period that we're living in right now is crucial. And for a long time, the guides were talking about it in terms of present and future tenses. And they're no longer talking about it in future tense. They're saying that those most intense times of squeezing through the eye of the needle are happening right now. And what is happening is that we are going up a whole octave. That is a terminology that they have been using with us lately. And you can see us, people, we can talk about it in terms of densities, right? So that's one way that people talk about it. There are different density levels, and now we're talking about the nature of reality. Currently, humanity is occupying the third density. And what is happening that we are going up an octave to the fourth density. It doesn't even matter if this is terminology that you relate to or not, because the idea is that it's happening now. So we're not talking some spiritual notions that may or may not happen, that may or may not apply to us. We're talking about the changes that are happening now. And we are seeing these changes as they're happening. Some we're seeing, some we cannot see, right? Because when things are happening from the inside, we have limited perspective. But what we can see, that briefly, as I mentioned, certain systems are breaking up, right? On the other hand, you can see different communities coming together. You can see that conversations such as this one are allowed to be had and are becoming more and more mainstream. So you can see the shift of the collective as it is happening, as more and more people open up to bigger concepts and to spiritual realities and to the reality that we're not the only species in the universe, and even on our planet, intelligent species on our planet, we are not. So all these things that are happening are actual, we could say them indications, but there are the actual shifts that are taking place that we are talking about. But these are the shifts that we're seeing from the inside. So if you take a step back and listen to the guides, which is the gift that they give, is that they have a much broader perspective than us. They see us as a system. They can see the earth. They know our history before we know our history. And yes, they have glimpses of what we call the future. So they bear the gift of having a much broader perspective. And as a result, they are not as upset by all the upsets that we are experiencing as humans. They see those as the bigger markers of change, just as the fire expressed, right? So when we see destruction, we often react with fear. The guides see destruction as the preparation for the newness to grow. And it's not only true for fire, it is true for even for ourselves. So even the layers that we shed as we do inner work and shadow work and inner child work, those painful layers that we shed, those, and that's channeled, those become the fertilizer from which we grow. So us resenting those layers is really kind of a mind game of us resenting our parts that are allowing us to grow and expand and become more than we are in this moment in time.
Have they given any information about the nature of our ruling class and why the systems are so anti-human, why there's so much psychopathy at the top and seemingly evil that runs this planet? Many believe there was an etheric parasitic influence that has infected a lot of the ruling class. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, there's definitely a lot of greed. So people use the word, right, battle between light and dark. And in some ways, it's very real. It's real to the extent that there is dichotomy. There's duality. It's not real in the way that there's no really battle because it's all of the light and it's all oneness. However, in our dimension, in our reality, there is duality. You can experience as good and bad. And you can say from that perspective, on that spectrum, that greed and control are bad. Why are they bad? Because they're constricting, they are restricting our growth, they are restricting our development, they're restrictive of open flow of energy, of love, of abundance. That is why we can consider them bad. So, yes, there are bad forces, there are bad people, they are a part of this duality. But the nature of this change, that everything is being pushed up to the surface. So what's happening now, politics have been corrupt on earth for a very long time. This is not a new phenomena. And it's true, I'm sure, for millennia, but even we're talking about modern politics. Modern politics have been corrupt on earth for a very long time. So the idea is that the corruption is not new. What is new? It is that it's coming all to the surface. There is no longer place to hide anything, to avoid anything, or to avoid or hide it in any way. It must come to the surface. We must deal and face everything so we can begin creating what we truly want. And that is what we're seeing right now. And that is why we're seeing so much corruption and so much negativity, because it's all being pushed up to the surface. So we are forced to deal with it.
Let's talk a little bit more about Hathor and some of the information that you've received from this being.
Yes. So, as we briefly mentioned, both the Divine Feminine and Assyrian Collective. So we're talking about really very wide range of wisdom. Their nature as the Divine Feminine goes all the way, from their perspective, to the flow of initial creation. And they have been involved with humanity and with the earth before its existence as we know it. So they evolved as physical beings in the Sirius star system. That's where they have ascended as a Sirius collective and became involved with spreading and guiding life throughout the universe. And our planet is one of the planets they have been involved with. That is why, in a way, we are their children. In a way, we are them. We're aspects of them. And that is why our true nature is much more complex than we realize, especially when we begin taking into account our galactic nature and we include our galactic ancestors. So that is in terms of their nature. Now, as we mentioned, they were physical beings, they have ascended. What does that mean in terms of their physicality? They are beyond the physical. So they are light beings. That's one. Again, these are all terminologies, but they're light beings. However, they have the ability to densify themselves or themselves is a plural. They have the ability, first of all, to individuate themselves based on their personality and become individual. So also when I channel, I usually channel an individual, even though it's a collective. And an individual has the ability to densify themselves enough to create a body that is physical in our dimension. And one of the very, very exciting advances, advances that happened in the last couple of years, that they have returned again in the physical. So they are physical beings on the earth right now, Hathors, in a secure location. I believe something has to do with the mountain or mountain range. And a part of their physical presence is that bridging the frequency gap in helping us prepare for full-on, face-to-face, open physical contact.
For those that are interested in attempting to channel themselves, to make a connection to higher beings, aside from the inner work that we discussed earlier, how would you suggest that they begin to make that connection?
So meditation. Meditation is the most important basic tool for any type of connection. Whether a person is interested in just connecting to their own intuition, to have a better gut feeling, better intuitive hits, whether a person is practicing to enhance their inner vision, whether a person wanting to channel, like you mentioned, different beings. So it doesn't matter what type of connection you want to enhance. If you're talking about enhancing your connection, meditation, and more importantly, daily meditation, is the most important tool. And there's so many different types of meditations. And there's so many layers to what meditation is. And let's mention just a few. So meditation is learning to exercise that muscle of quiet between thoughts. Meditation is a way to learn to become a better listener to your own thoughts. Meditation is a way to become a better listener to your unconscious thoughts, beliefs, emotions, states of beings. Meditation is the best tool to begin developing your subtle senses, which is a part of our human evolution and a part of developing any psychic, intuitive, or channeling connection. So these are just a few of what meditation is or can be. And these are things for you to work with, right? So many people, and I hear it so much, oh, I can't meditate, or I don't know how to meditate. My mind is just too busy. People that say that don't understand what meditation is. And if your mind is too busy, that's the perfect reason to start working out that muscle of quiet between the busy thoughts. Now, is it possible to go in meditation and be clear and calm for 40 minutes without even a thought? Yes, it is possible, actually. Is it common and typical and happens every time you meditate? No, it really, really doesn't. And that doesn't make your meditation any lesser than. Even so, as I mentioned, I've been meditating for 13 years daily, and I'm talking long meditations. And still, there are times that I go into meditation and my mind is super active and super busy, and it's thinking. Usually it comes with a burst of creativity, and I wake up when I get up with a bunch of inspirations. But the idea is that meditation is not always floating in bliss, and it's not always receiving downloads. Meditation is exercising that muscle, all those muscles that I mentioned. And through that, you begin becoming clear on communication that you are receiving and everything else. But more than anything, As I said, it's about getting to know yourself, your own energy, your own thoughts, your own states of consciousness, and how does it feel when it changes a little bit. And really practice, practice, practice. That's why you want the meditation to be daily and not monthly. So it's a part of you. So you're really honing those skills.
For the last few minutes, let's talk a little bit about light language. I've discussed this briefly a few times on my show. I don't have the best understanding about this. Maybe you could help us a little bit. What is light language? What's the purpose?
Yeah.
How is it used?
Yeah, I would love to. And I think I'm a really good person to ask about that because light language was the latest practice for me to become on board with because it was too woo-woo for me. It was too weird for me. So it took me a while to become okay with it, to start practicing it, and a couple of years to start sharing it with people. And to my luck, now I consider myself lucky because now I love light language. To my fortune, this is sound and frequency through sound is one of Hathor's specialties. It's one of their main specialties and what they're bringing to humanity at this time. And light language, let's talk in general. So first of all, light language is channeling. I will start there. I consider light language as channeling. It is just not verbal channeling. We don't use known words. Some people know light language from the practice of speaking in tongues. And indeed, that is one form of light language. Because the part of Christianity, when people are in ecstasy, they are in a state of trance, they verbalize these sounds that are not English. Sometimes they speak Latin or some other ancient language, and sometimes, more often than not, these are sounds, just sounds that don't have clear meanings, known meanings. This is light language. This is not the whole of light language, but this is an example of light language. So now we take it a step further, and we can generalize that light language is any vocalization by a human, any human vocalization that is channeling, that is not words that we can understand. Now, those can be sounds, vowels, singing, actual language, ancient languages. So it can be a lot of different things. And my guides actually use a terminology field tuning rather than light language, although now they also use light language to accommodate us. But the idea, why is it field tuning? It's because those words, those sounds that are really frequency interact with our energy field, tunes our field to resonate in coherence, internal coherence, and then with each other, which amplifies us even more. So that is what field tuning is. And you can see as light language, either just different terminology as the same as field tuning or a type of field tuning. Does that help at all to clarify what it is?
Can light language be a consistent language, meaning there is meaning behind each sound and inflection that's consistent every time, or is it just sounds that are energetic and have emotion associated with it?
Both.
Okay. Is there any documented light language that people use normally that is consistent?
I don't know. And I don't know because I haven't looked into it, but I will say with the emergence of AI, that may be able to help us with pattern recognition and put words into light language. However, I will say this. This is a very left brain question and left brain way of thinking. Now, it is not an accusation because I share that fault. And as I practiced light language more and more and more, I began recognizing a lot of repeating words and terms and sentences, and my brain went to where your brain went. And I started inquiring regarding meanings. And at first, they gave me certain meanings. They told me, for example, that the word om, which is not always pronounced exactly om, but the word om actually has a meaning, and it means love. It's an actual word, but it's also a sound with frequency. And they gave me a few other words, and then they stopped. And I did not understand why they stopped, because I thought I was going to develop a whole vocabulary dictionary. I thought that was where it was going. And as soon as I thought that, they stopped giving me any meanings. And I said, but why? And the answer, which did not come in concrete words like we're discussing it, I think intentionally, is that we are losing the meaning, we're losing the value when we start splitting hairs and we start analyzing things with our left brain and we start wanting one-on-one meanings. There are some instances when one-on-one meanings may be available, but even then we are losing so much of the meaning and the subtlety and the frequency of it all. So yes, some of them are words, some of them are movements, right? So a lot of the energy that I channel with light language are movements of energy. How do we express in language movements of energy? So the more we try to make it understandable and concrete, the more we're limiting what it really is. So really, the sound is frequency, and the frequency interacts with us and affects us in many, many, many different levels and layers. The verbal channeling works a lot, not only, but a lot with our intellectual mind, because words, that's how we understand things. But of course, even that has energetics, but also with our intellectual mind. Light language bypasses the intellectual mind because it doesn't have that left brain language anchor. So it's just emotional, just energetic, just frequency.
Thank you for that. I think that's the best explanation I've heard surrounding light language so far. Is there anything else that we didn't cover yet that you'd like to leave the audience with before we close out?
The last thing that I want to mention is that I teach light language and that it's one of my absolute favorite things to do. And I really want people to understand that we are in a new era now. And, light language, the way I teach it, at least, the way I understand it and the way I teach it, is two main things. One, I teach you how to be clear, how to recognize the flow, how to hold that space with clarity. And as you realize, I emphasize inner work. So that's the first part. And the second part is once you're clear, once you know how to connect to the energy and hold that space, how to express it with your voice. And a part of the era we are in, a part of that evolution we are in, is for people to start connecting to their own creativity, their own voice, their own expression. So even if you don't want to become a verbal channeler, even if you are not psychic or want to become psychic, I really, really recommend engaging in some kind of a training, some kind of a structured meditation, exercises, this type of work, because you're really going to help yourself navigate these intense changes in the most gentle and smooth way, helping yourself actively move forward rather than waiting for the wave of energy to sweep you away. So that is something that I want to mention, that I teach light language, but honestly, if you don't want to learn light language, start meditating, but actively engage in those practices that help you move forward.
Well, right on, Dr. Yafi. Let the audience know how they can find out more about you.
Yes, I have a website. It is yafichanneling.com. Yafi, my first name, Yafi, channeling.com. There you can join my Patreon. There are links to the books. You can email me, be in touch, join any of the travels, trainings, or retreats coming up.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'd definitely love to talk more in the future. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brainsupreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order. Hello friends, I am so excited to tell you about Independent Media Token. Independent Media Token is a brand new way to show your support for independent media without having to donate a dime. Independent Media Token is a cryptocurrency on the Solana blockchain designed to generate funds to promote and foster the growth of independent content creators, allowing them to engage in their art without having to worry about being demonetized. Through a network of media partners, of which you yourself can become a part of, Independent Media Token's goal is to ensure the powers that be can never cut off all of our areas of funding and censor the only free voices left in the world. Join the movement today. You can pick up Independent Media Token using Phantom Wallet or the Solana wallet of your choice, where you can easily swap your Solana for IMT. Grab some IMT today and remember to always know your team. To learn more, visit independentmediatoken.com or use the link right in the description. Are you and your family prepared for an emergency? Maybe the fake alien invasion? Now is the time to prepare yourself and your family for any event. Check out Prep Starts Now. Their mission is to provide high-quality preparedness products that empower individuals and families to be ready for any situation. They're committed to delivering reliable, trusted gear to ensure your safety, security, and peace of mind in times of need. Their product selection is carefully curated to provide you with the essential gear you need to stay prepared. From emergency kits to tactical tools, every item is chosen for its reliability and practicality. Prep Starts Now understands the importance of family, and their goal is to equip you with everything you need to build a solid plan for your family's preparedness. In today's ever-changing world, being prepared is more important than ever, and Prep Starts Now is here to help you and your family stay ready with quality products and practical guidance. Use the link in the description and get 15% off your order.